Hi, this is Jean Gunderson. It is the end of the school year in May of 2025. And in this video, I'm going to do a little compare and contrast of two emergent reading programs, SIPPS Beginning and UFLI Foundations. I have been teaching SIPPS Beginning in grades K and sometimes 1 for the past 4 years. I have only done one session, well, not one group, for a quarter and a half using UFLI Foundations. I had one kindergarten group on SIPPS Beginning, one kindergarten group on UFLI Foundations starting in the middle of the third quarter. So some of the students had started SIPPS Beginning earlier. Some of them were doing well and I kept them on SIPPS Beginning. Other kids I moved over to the UFLI Foundations group. And the reason that I needed to start the UFLI Foundations group, or that I felt it necessary, was because I got multiple students from out of country in the middle of the third quarter. And I didn't want them to have to try to learn the 15 high frequency words in the first 14 lessons that SIPPS Beginning has when they don't have those words in their oral vocabulary. So I thought it would be a great time to try out UFLI Foundations. So again, I had one kindergarten group on SIPPS Beginning. They were several lessons ahead. They had started earlier, and one kindergarten group on UFLI Foundations. Spoiler alert, they are both good foundational reading skills programs. I did a little document here where I show some similarities and differences, and I've highlighted where I think one is the clear winner as far as what I was looking for, but they're both very good. So SIPPS Beginning, let's take a look at some of the similarities and differences. There are 15 high frequency words or sight words taught in the first 14 lessons of SIPPS Beginning, but there are only 6 high frequency words taught in the first 14 lessons of UFLI Foundations. So in SIPPS Beginning, they call them sight words in the 4th edition, which is what I have. In the 5th edition, they now refer to them as high frequency words. In UFLI Foundations, they refer to them as irregular words or temporarily irregular if they can be decoded, but not yet successfully by the students because they haven't learned those letter sound correspondences. But that's what I wanted, was less high frequency words, because again, my students were learning English as a new language. In SIPPS Beginning, there are 6 letter sound correspondences in the first 14 lessons. And in UFLI Foundations, there are 11 letter sound correspondences in the first 14 lessons. I wanted these students, because I only had them for the last quarter and a half of kindergarten, to get all of their letter sound correspondences. So it looked like UFLI would be the better program for that. In SIPPS Beginning, all single sound phonics patterns are taught by lesson 54, with some digraphs taught before some single letter sounds. For example, TH, CH, the trigraph TCH, DGE are taught before Y and Z. By the way, SIPPS Beginning has 55 lessons. UFLI Foundations has well over 100 lessons, but the ones that line up with SIPPS Beginnings only go into the 40s. Lesson 34 is where the instruction ends in single sound, letter sound correspondences. And then after that, there's some review lessons for that. And then it goes on to more high level phonics patterns. So UFLI Foundations has this one manual for all of the levels, even going into polysyllabic words, looking at prefixes and suffixes, different affixes. And SIPPS has different levels. So they have beginning, which teaches the emergent literacy, but then they have different levels that come after that. So UFLI is a one-stop shop, but SIPPS has different levels. And I'm only talking about the beginning today because that's what lines up with UFLI Foundations lessons 1 to 34. There is a lighter decoding load in the stories in SIPPS Beginning. Because the kids have learned so many high frequency words, they don't have to sound out as many words in the stories in SIPPS Beginning. In UFLI Foundations, there is a heavy decoding load. They don't teach a lot of high frequency words. They focus a lot on decodable words. And as a result, the students have a lot of words to decode in the stories. So I will share that I never put the stories in front of my students besides me reading them to the students when they were in the iPads. I didn't print out the stories and hand them to the students because right away, starting at lesson one, it was too overwhelming how many words they would have to try to decode. I did do some reading A to Z books during my UFLI Foundations group, but mostly because I did want to get through all 34 lessons before the end of the school year, we did not do a lot of reading of decodable text. It was mainly the single words and sometimes the sentences, and that's where the students were. There is a similar phonics scope and sequence in these curricula, UFLI and SIPPS beginning. I've used Super Kids before. I love Super Kids, but the Super Kids scope and sequence is going to be quite different than the scope and sequences either of these programs, because Super Kids starts with the letter C. They're very focused on handwriting in that program. And letter C is taught 13th in SIPPS beginning and 14th in UFLI Foundations. So halfway through the alphabet, whereas it's taught first in Super Kids. But I did find out that the scope and sequence lined up very well between UFLI Foundations and SIPPS beginning, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. Each lesson in both of these programs takes 2 days, but you could add a third day to work more with the skills. In fact, that's why my SIPPS beginning students who started before my UFLI students finished only 6 lessons ahead of my UFLI students. My UFLI students finished at 34, and my SIPPS beginning students finished at 40, because I added a third day for reading in SIPPS beginning. I did day 1, the iPad lesson, and the first half of the poster, which has the story on it. And day 2, I did the iPad lesson for B, the B part of the story, the B part of the lesson, and then the second half of the story poster. And then on the third day, I finished the story poster. If we hadn't finished it, we did spelling. On the back of the sheet, the spelling sheet was the story, but we often used the little blue books. So the SIPPS, my third day, was mainly a reading day, but also spelling. I would have loved to add a third day to UFLI Foundations, but I didn't often have a chance to do that. I did stop like right before Easter to read Nan and Pap from reading A to Z and those kinds of stories so that they could have something to take home. But I mainly had to just kind of get through this stuff by doing the 2 lessons for each story so that I could get through lesson 34. If I did this in the future, I would slow down, get through fewer letter sound correspondences, and let them do more reading of very foundational emergent texts. SIPPS beginning has mastery tests built into the program. In UFLI, you design your own mastery tests. You do your own thing for tests. And I would guess you could probably get some online at this point, a Teachers Pay Teacher or something like that. I didn't find it difficult. I just took some of the decodable words and the sight words and typed them up and had the kids read them. SIPPS beginning introduces 4-sound decoding in lesson 22, but only expects it in words and just a few words, like putting the sound of S at the end of a word. UFLI Foundations introduces 4-sound decoding in lesson 20, and it expects it a lot. Once we have that 4th sound, they have a lot of 4-sound words, and they have sentences with 4-sound words. And so I thought that SIPPS beginning was more gentle with that, because I know my students who were in the UFLI group were not ready for 4-sound words. So I would just read those to them as we went through the UFLI lessons. Both programs have a small amount of phonemic awareness at the beginning of each lesson. I thought it was adequate. You can always supplement that if needed. And there was adequate encoding practice during each lesson for both of these programs. The SIPPS beginning stories are more interesting and they flow more smoothly because they've taught the kids so many high frequency words. The stories don't sound so stilted. And then of course, though, the flip side of that is that they've taught them high frequency words that have letter sounds correspondences that they have not learned yet. In UFLI and Foundations, the stories sound like tongue twisters, as one of my colleagues said, but the alignment guides are provided for other decodable texts, so you don't have to use the UFLI decodable text. You can use reading A to Z or Spire or many different programs. In SIPPS beginning, the instructional app has an algorithm that keeps track of correct and incorrect answers and adapts presentation of sounds and sight words accordingly. But in UFLI, the instructional Google slides are static. They're just there to present. You can add or delete slides, but they don't, there's no algorithm that keeps track of student progress there. The cost of SIPPS beginning is $1,175, and the cost of UFLI Foundations is $100. So remember that SIPPS beginning is just one level of SIPPS. You want to have all of the levels. You're going to be you'd be spending a lot more money, several $1,000s, whereas UFLI Foundations has all of the levels of the foundational skills phonics instruction for just $100. So they're both very good programs. It depends upon what you're looking for, but I hope that that helped you understand a little bit more about what each program has. My advice, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Pick something. If you don't have a big budget, go with UFLI or something else. There's many other programs that are for foundational skills. These just happen to be the two that I've worked with in addition to Super Kids. And adapt it to meet the needs of your students. How I taught UFLI Foundations, I taught it differently than it is recommended in the book. Same skills, just a different order of presentation. In the book, there's a lot of going back and forth between looking at the iPad or the smartboard or wherever this is being presented, and then writing, the students encoding themselves. And I did it differently. I went with day one being all iPad. And what I did is I did the day one and the day two lessons on the iPad on day one. And when I did the day one lessons, I was presenting it. When I did the day two lessons, I was having them read the words and go over what I had just told them. So I would start the lesson with this. I would use square magnets for the phonemic awareness that comes with the UFLI lesson. And then I would present the Google slides. I deleted a lot of slides, and I will show you later how I did that and why. Day two of a UFLI lesson, I would do the phonemic awareness again. Then I would use a blending board. They have an online blending board that you can use for free. I did not use that. I used my own Orton Gillingham blending board. Actually, first I had the students have little letters that they could manipulate in front of themselves when we were only working with a few letters. And they each had a little bag with further letters. But then when it got to be more letters, I used my blending board, with my letters, which are more like index card size. And I kept the consonants in alphabetical order. I kept the vowels myself and went over the letter and name and sound for the vowels every time. And then I handed out the consonants and to the students, and then I would do the back and forth with the sounds and words with the letters, with asking what was needed, and then they would find it in their own letters, or they would say, oh, look at, oh, my neighbor has it, that kind of thing. So I'd say map. We'd have it up on the blending board. Change map to tap. Okay, now we got to figure out what sound it is and what letter is going to represent that sound, who has it. I give back the M, somebody gives me the T. Now we have tap. Now we are going to change the P to an N. Now, give me the N. Now let's sound, read. I would always do sound, read. I did the a lot of the procedures from SIPPS beginning because that's what I'm used to, and I really like them. They work well and they move things along very well. After sound, read, it goes down to sound, just sound read, and then just read. But my UFLI group definitely just needed to continue on with the sound, read the whole time. After we would do the blending, where the kids got to have the letters and see when theirs were needed, then we went over the papers, which I would hand them. On the back would be a half sheet stapled to a full sheet on the front. The half sheet is something that's right off the UFLI site. You can get all the stuff for free that goes with the manual. You only have to buy the manual. There was a half sheet that goes home to parents and guardians that shows what we have learned that day. And then stapled to the front, I would have a full sheet. I just used a sheet from another SIPPS level extension as my full spelling sheet, but you could just use any kind of paper for the kids to spell on. And then I would have them spell first the uppercase letter that we learned that day. We do the letter and the sound, then the lowercase. And then I would have them do 4 decodable words. And I'd usually put a little pattern in there for them to find where it was like that when they read across, they could see that the consonants were the same, but when they read down, they could see that the vowels were the same. And then I would do 2 high frequency words, or as they call them, irregular words from UFLI Foundations. So the new ones we had just learned, or if we didn't have any in that lesson, then some review words. And then I would send that home with the kids, and that would be my day 2. Time, 18 minutes. So that's how long each of those would take. So in order to get it in during 18 minutes so that we could have our 4 minutes to play, then that's how I handled that for day 1 and day 2 of UFLI Foundations. So here are my conclusions after using both programs. I will stick with SIPPS Beginning for emergent reading instruction, except for when I have students learning English as a new language, in which case I will use UFLI, evaluate on a case-by-case basis, depending upon their language level. But I will go more slowly and use the reading A to Z decodable readers. My students were never able to read the UFLI lessons. I mentioned that they were too intensive for the students who were just learning how to blend. Unless UFLI is being used in Tier 1, in which case I may use UFLI more. So I know that some UFLI Foundations manuals have arrived at my school this week, and I understand they're going to be used in Tier 1. And as I put here, supplemental reading instruction does not happen in a vacuum. So if the kids are getting this in their Tier 1, then I may be using UFLI more in the Tier 2, Tier 3 pull-out instruction. I do want to show you a few things down here. These are the decodable readers for lesson 14 for each program. So for SIPPS, you would have a sheet like this, and then on the back is where I would put their spelling. And you also get little blue books, and the little blue books are very beneficial because there's only 1 sentence or later on 2 sentences on each page, because that makes it less overwhelming for the kids. And the little blue books fit nicely in their hands. If this sheet is overwhelming for the kids, it's nice to have the little blue book. There also is a poster where we read it off the first time, and we sound out the decodable words, and we read the sight words. I do have an entire video, in fact, 2 videos about SIPPS. If you're interested in learning more about SIPPS, you can access those. Then, I wanted to read that to you. So here's the story for 14, and there's a picture that goes with each one. There's a cowboy, and he's eating some beans and sleeping, and then the ant is eating the remnants of the beans and then sleeping. Can you see me? Am I a man? I am a man. Can you see me? I am on the mat. Am I an ant? So the ant is now in the picture. I am an ant. Can you see me? I am on the can. And then this is the UFLI reader for lesson 14. The students are to illustrate the story. This is all on 1 page, and it's all on 1 page, and I'm going to read it. It's not in the little books. You could make it into a little book, though, if you put 1 sentence on each page yourself. That's what I wanted to say. It is called The Cat Can. Can Cam fit on the cot? Cam cannot fit on the cot. Can the cat fit on the cot? The cat can fit on the cot. The cat can nap on the cot. Cam cannot nap on the cot. Cam can nap on the mat. And then here I have the letter sound correspondence mnemonics. I already have the SIPPS beginning mnemonics up because that's what I've been teaching for the last 4 years. And I added little squares with the UFLI mnemonics. So my UFLI kids always pointed to these squares and said these. We always went through on Monday and said the letter sound mnemonics. And the SIPPS beginning did these larger pictures. Next year, this is something that I didn't mention earlier. I am going to teach even my SIPPS beginning students. I'm going to teach them the UFLI mnemonics. I'm going to teach them both. So if you get SIPPS beginning and you're in kindergarten, you will get the UFLI and the SIPPS beginning mnemonics for the short vowels. And if you're in UFLI, you'll just get the UFLI ones, because the SIPPS beginning mnemonics for the short vowels have been very difficult for those younger emergent readers. They are very crisp in their sounds, and it makes sense. It's where the cat is located in relationship to the chair, but my kids have had some struggles, especially with those prepositions and keeping them straight. So it's at the chair, in the chair, under the chair, on the chair, and edge of the chair, Whereas the UFLI short vowel mnemonics are a bit easier for those young kids, I think. Apple, itch, up, octopus, edge, and I bet you can think of motions to go with each of those as well. I did find at one point that the UFLI and SIPPS mnemonics actually lined up exactly one day. And I was a little bit ahead in the SIPPS beginning lessons, and I didn't write down what number it lines up at, but you could look that up in the scope and sequence documents. This was right before that happened, and the blue sticky notes show the mnemonics or the letter sounds correspondences that we had learned in SIPPS beginning, that the SIPPS beginning kindergarten group had learned. And then the sticky notes, the smiley faces show the ones that the UFLI group had learned, but P and G had not been learned by the SIPPS beginning group. So nobody had learned E. P and G had been learned by UFLI, but not SIPPS. And H and R had been learned, the sounds for these had been learned by SIPPS, but not UFLI, but is very similar. And then eventually they ended up just matching up exactly. I do want to show you what I did with the slides and why. I wanted less slides. These slides have a lot of the schedule, and then it checks it off. And I've seen lessons where the teachers are, celebrating every time a check is made during the different parts of the lesson. I can see why several students might need that. My students don't need that. They can just kind of feel the parts that are happening. Plus, remember, I'm fitting this entire presentation, 2 days worth, into one lesson, because on day one is when we do all of the iPad stuff. So this is how I would do it. I would leave this one, which tells what we're learning, the letter sound correspondence and name of V, delete the schedule, delete the symbol key, delete the thing that says day one, because I'm doing them both on day one. Delete the schedule, keep phonemic awareness. That's when I get out the magnets and do the phonemic awareness. Delete the schedule. I leave all of the visual drill. Do that with the kids. Delete the schedule. I do leave the auditory drill introduction, and then I have this blank page when I'm doing the auditory drill with them. Delete the schedule. I delete the blending drill. We will use the blending board on day 2. Delete the schedule again. I do leave the new concept and all of this stuff, except for let's write together. And then I watch me read and let's read together. I do leave. But now take a look at this. This is what I was talking about before. There's 6 words here, and 4 of them have 4 sounds. So I kind of wish they would have just 2 and 3 sound words throughout lessons 1 through 34, and then maybe have some bonus words at the end or something like that. I felt like there was maybe some missing lessons or some missing practice with those 2 and 3 sound words before we added on so many 4 sound words. And it's not just adding an S at the end like SIPPS beginning does. You can see that there's the consonant blends in vast, vent, vest, and vend. I would delete the spelling slide and the let's spell together. I delete the schedule. I delete the first we did it because we're not done yet. We're still going. I would delete day 2, delete the schedule. Now we're back to what we are reviewing what we've just gone over. Again, this is supposed to be going into day 2, but I do this right all together on day 1. And now I'm having the students tell me more about what this is because I've just taught it and now they're reviewing it. So I keep all this and then just delete the schedules again. The word work. Keep all the irregular words, review. Get rid of the let's spell together. Again, the lessons have it where there's stopping often to spell something on their whiteboards, whereas I have them spelling on day 2. Still more irregular words. Okay, I do keep the connected text, but I read it to them. And then delete all the spelling ones because we will spell on day 2. And then I read the decodable text to them. And then I keep this second "we did it" as our only "we did it." And the kids are very excited about that because after we get through this iPad lesson, it's minute 18. We say, "we did it." And then we play for our 4 minutes. And then the next day we do our phonemic awareness, our blending board, look at our half sheet, do our spelling. And as soon as spelling is done and everybody has it correct, then we do our 4 minutes of play. All right, that is the information that I know about SIPPS beginning versus UFLI foundations. You may know a lot more, especially a lot of people have been using UFLI. So please feel free to leave a comment on my YouTube video here so that we can all know more about UFLI or other programs or more about SIPPS versus UFLI. Thank you very much for your time.